Hi. Just when you think you've seen everything, then you see something new. So I've fixed and repaired hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of 3303s, both IMs and IMAs in all different varieties from all different manufacturing time periods. I've made about 21 videos about problems and things with 3303s. Today we have something completely different. So this is an IMA3303. And just based on simple observation, there's no manufacturing date on the labels inside the doors, but just judging by the appearance of the circuit boards, this is what I would call a late model IMA3303. The sets that were made in 2007, 8, 9, and final production in 2010. The customer who sent it to me, Steve, he says that it was installed in 2016 because I believe, if I remember correctly, he had an earlier model which they replaced. I don't recall where he said he got this one from. I think he bought it from someone online, and he said by his estimation it was brand new. So 2007 through 2010 are what we call the late model IMA3303s. They are the very last ones that they made. This one has an unusual problem. I'll explain the setup I have on it right now. So I have it hooked up to my 2 bench power supplies as normal. When I powered it up, the clock came on. I didn't bother to set the time, but we actually could do that if we wanted to. It is 10:51, so it'll take a second here. 52 is always good. And in the little bit of time I had it powered up, setting all this up, it seems to keep good time. It's in nice physical condition, it's nice and white, looks really good, and all that kind of stuff. Let me show you what's wrong with it. And so you can really actually, let's hear what's wrong with it. I have to take the camera off the tripod. Pardon all the shakiness. Okay, anyway, so listen really carefully. This is the microphone right up next to the grill. See, grill, microphone, it's like an inch away from it. If you listen carefully, right now it's completely silent. If we activate the intercom, I'm going to push the door talk button. Obviously, we're receiving some sort of alien signals. If we do inside patio talk, it's the same thing. I'm fairly certain it's a distress call from the Andromeda system. If we turn the radio on, AM, no radio plays. I don't have an antenna hooked to it because there was no point. Now if we do door talk, same distress signal. If we try to change stations, it's obviously some kind of encoded alien message. FM, same thing. Scan, scan doesn't actually work. It just jumped up. Oh no, there it went. Scan does work. No signals. Now the noise went away. Oh, that's because the intercom shut off. Timed out. And if you notice between AM and FM, the pitch of the distress call is different. Now, the big question here is, why does it do this? And also, I was able, I don't know if I can do it now, I was able to make it do it after it end called. Now it doesn't seem to want to. Alright, enough button pushing. Back on the tripod. Okay, so the question is, what, why? How come? I don't know. I tried really hard to get a hold of Giorgio Tsoukalos on Ancient Aliens and maybe one of the fellows on the show to see if they had any insight about this, but they didn't return my calls. Harvey said that he knows them, but they don't want to talk about intercoms. It's not good enough. Nobody got abducted. Nobody got probed. None of those exciting things happened. There wasn't tic-tacs in the sky. It's just weird noise on an intercom. So the question is, have I seen this before? Maybe once before, maybe. I don't seem to have any notes about it, so I'm not exactly sure. Does this problem fall onto the 10 most common things that go wrong list with IM or IMA3303s? Absolutely, positively not. It does not. Where do the sounds come from? I don't know. I do have the chime module disconnected. Here's the end of the cable that's unplugged. It appears to me to be some type of what we would refer to as digital noise, hence the bleeping and blipping and all of those sort of things. It's not really analog-y kind of noise where it's static or crackling or something, or a hum or something like that. It sounds like digital noise. In fact, in some respects, it sounds a lot like the type of digital noise that I've seen on installations in people's homes where the intercom system was installed by the same fella who did the security alarm system, and he ran the 4 conductor wires that go to the alarm control keypads in parallel with the intercom wires. And those types of modern alarm systems, the keypads communicate with the alarm control panel with digital information like sounds like this, and the intercom wires will pick that up. So the question is, what in this set would cause digitalized noise that somehow is bleeding into the intercom and going through the amplifier so you can hear it come out of the speaker? The digital parts of a 3303 would be the microcontroller on the microcontroller board. That's the board right behind the faceplate that also has the display on it, because that is a digital device. Also, the part of the tuner section is digital. The actual tuner itself, this box, it's not really digital. It is a quartz synthesized tuner, but it may or may not make that kind of noise, not sure. But this part of the tuner down in here does have digital aspects to it. So the real question is, what's up with that? Well, my guess is, and it's only a guess right now because I haven't actually worked on it beyond just hooking it up for this first part of this video, is what happened and where do you start to look for the problem. I'm going to begin going down the rabbit hole, because that's what this is, because I don't know what's wrong with it at this point. I'm going to start going down the rabbit hole of that, the actual noise. In fact, let me shut this off. The noise that we're hearing is probably present in all 3303s all the time, but the way the circuitry is designed, it's blocked out of bleeding into essentially the amplifier, therefore you hear it now. It's not supposed to be heard because obviously, it's wrong. And also the tuner doesn't work. You can manually tune stations. It will scan, tune, and lock in on stations, but of course there's no reception. So it seems as if it may be a tuner related issue, but I'm not exactly sure yet. So this will be a rabbit hole project, because all you can do is start with your best guess based on experience and go from there. I just had an idea. So let me pause the video for a second and we're going to try one more thing. I have enhanced our setup. So what did I do? I got my RCA audio cable with a 3.5 millimeter. Basically, I plugged my phone into it. Let's see if the CD tape and auxiliary inputs work. It works better if you turn the power back on. Do this.
Enjoy it in private. Well, that is not the experience you get from Delectables squeeze-ups.
Both.
These treats are the first gourmet cat treat where feeding is interactive. You get to squeeze up.
Okay, so now we've learned something new. The audio input works, and if the audio input works, that tells us a bunch of things. It tells us that when you push CD tape or auxiliary, the microcontroller sees the input, opens up an audio channel, does all the things it's supposed to do, and opens up the audio input, so the signal from my phone now goes through the amplifier and you hear it through the speaker. That tells us a lot. It tells us that the basic audio control circuitry, the amplifier input, the amplifier itself, most likely all the power supply things are fine because the amplifier and power supply is closely tied together. All of those things are likely to be fine. So that eliminates about half the set, which is good. It doesn't necessarily eliminate a microcontroller problem, because microcontroller problems are not always an all or nothing situation. I've seen a lot of microcontrollers where every single thing works on it perfectly just like you want it to, but you can't get the AM radio to play. The FM's great, but the AM won't work because the inputs into the microcontroller or something inside the microcontroller or the firmware in the microcontroller is corrupted, and it won't tune the AM tuner correctly, so you can't play AM. So it's not an all or nothing problem. While I was setting this up, I had another idea. We should test something else also. So again, pause the video. I'll be right back. All right, enhancement setup number 2. I've connected it up to a standard 3303 terminal board. This is my standard shop testing setup. I have one inside speaker and I have one door speaker over there. And let's see if the intercom works. So we'll set the intercom volume about half so it's nice and loud, because we all know you like the feedback. Door talk. Seems to work. Inside patio talk. That works. And, oops. When I hold the inside patio talk down button on the master station, oh, it's reverberating. Okay, when you hold it down, you can hear it. Alien sounds in the remote speakers now. They're taking over the house. All right, end call. They all turned on? Yes, they are. Okay. No intercom functions from the remote. Nothing there. Let's go ahead and set the clock just so it doesn't blink. Now, I don't know if we can program any radio stations. I'm just doing this randomly to see if we can actually program them. So let's make sure that the remote music control functions are on, which they are. And no remote music control functions, which is interesting. But if we go back to the phone and play the podcast.
The puree while your cat chows down. Sammy eats everything, so it's great that it comes in a bunch of flavors. Chicken,
So we've learned more. We've learned that, so we know the audio inputs work because we can hear the podcast. We know that the intercom works correctly from the master station to the inside remote and to the door speaker, but we have no intercom functions from the remote speaker, and we have no remote music control functions. So that gives us more information. What information did that give us? Well, now we have maybe 2 problems, because one of the things I try to explain to people when I talk to them on the phone is there isn't always just one problem. Lots of times there's more than one problem. You got 1 problem, 2 problems, 3 problems, 5 problems, hopefully not 7 problems, because that's too many problems. This is going to be a rabbit hole, and I'm going to work on it. I think the approach I'm going to take on this is, my impression at the moment is that this is the digital noise is coming out of the tuner somehow. So in a 3303, it's relatively simple to isolate the tuner output from the rest of the set. And if we do that and the noise goes away, that's a good indication. Because what you want to do here is basic troubleshooting. I have a lot of people that contact me all the time and say, I have X problem with my intercom. How do I fix it? And it's like, well, before you have to try to fix it, you actually have to try to figure out what's wrong with it. And those are 2 different things. What you do is basic troubleshooting, no matter what it is. You have one problem, which is a big giant knot like this. And what you need to do is untangle the knot. And you do that by eliminating parts of the knot one at a time to see how that changes what the problem is. So we're going to divide it up. This is one of those forest for the trees things. So if you're in the forest, you can't see it because all you see are individual trees. But we've got a forest problem, and we need to divide it down into individual trees to see which tree is causing the problem. I'm not going to do like 97 sections on this video, but I will keep you updated as I move along, and let's see if we can actually fix it. It's the next day. and I've made some progress on our alien affected IMA3303. I worked on it yesterday after the last section of this video, but I ran out of time because I had to go to our new building because there's stuff being done and I need to be there for a while, so I just left it on the workbench. So it's the next morning, it's 9:30 in the morning, and as you can see, I've got it kind of Frankensteined up here. The first thing I did was I took all 3 boards out of the faceplate of the IMA3303 because in troubleshooting and working on a set with these kind of problems, there's a lot of taking it apart, putting it together, taking it apart, putting it together, and doing it in the faceplate just takes a lot of time and it's not the best way to go. It's easier to just take all the boards out. So I've got it kind of Frankensteined up here. It's connected to 2 power supply transformers here. I've got it wired up to a standard testing terminal board, which includes 1 remote speaker over there and 1 door speaker over there. Got a loose speaker here as the master station speaker and hooked up to a makeshift antenna connection for the time being. All of this is done this way to make it easy to take it apart, work on it, put it back together, see if you made progress, and. We have made progress. So, the first thing I did after the last section of this video and after I took it all apart was, the theory was maybe it was something to do with the radio tuner and digital noise, or the noise that we heard was coming out of the tuner. So I easily, because it's easy to do on a 3303, I disconnected the tuner section of the main board, which is the big green board in the back. I disconnected the components that allow power to the tuner section, so essentially turning the tuner section off, and then hooked it back up and tried it, and the noise was still there. So it wasn't something with the tuner, at least not the noise related part of the problem. Then I did the next most logical thing to do was we hypothesized that another source of the digital noise could be from the microcontroller on the microcontroller board, which is this light colored one here. The microcontroller is on the back side of the board where you can't see it, but I'll show you in a second, and it's got the display and all that kind of stuff. So I went to my stock of boards and I pulled out one of my replacement boards. This is the identical board. Have a late model IMA3303, and we know that it's good because right here on the corner I've written good, because it's a testing board. It's not one to be used for repairs. It's not one that I would ever sell. It's used for what I call intercom triage. It's a quick, easy way to tell whether this board has a problem or not, because you replace it with one that you know is good. So I swapped the 2 boards around, hooked it all back up, and the noise was still there. So now we know that it's not the tuner and it's not something to do with the microcontroller on the main board. It's got to be some other problem. I thought about it for a couple minutes, and based on the other things that were not working, no intercom functions and so on and so on and so on, I decided that it was probably a problem where the digital noise is in the system all the time anyway, because that it's not uncommon, and there would be components that would be blocking the signal so you don't hear it, because that's the way things are done sometimes. That, coupled with the fact that the intercom functions from the remote speakers didn't work, I decided that that would be the easy and quickest thing to tackle, because you got to fix the intercom control part of the system anyway. So let's do that now, eliminate that off the list and see where we get. And I did that. And now what we have is, and if you remember, if we activated the intercom, you heard the alien noises, and the aliens have been removed. They've been blocked. They've been stymied. They're up there flying around now going, what the heck did he do? What I did was I replaced the 3 integrated circuits and some their supporting components, these, on the main board, and that eliminated the alien sounds, and it also restored all of the intercom functions. So now we have door talk and reply. Sorry about the feedback. And inside patio talk and reply. And we have from a remote station door talk and reply, and inside patio talk and there's no hands-free reply on a 3-wire system from a remote speaker. We also now have intercom, remote intercom, or remote music control functions. I can turn the radio on, and maybe the volume is set. Oh, we're going to get to that. So you can turn the radio on. I pre-programmed 2 radio stations. So we have 104.5, 106.5, and then I can turn it off like that. I also verified that if we use the auxiliary inputs, which is CD tape or auxiliary, it plays correctly. And that was my phone. That was a little bit of 38 Special, who I've actually seen in concert and had my picture taken with the band. How about that? And I won a free t-shirt. All right, we've made good progress, but we still have one more thing wrong. So I'm going to turn the radio on, and it's on 106.5, which is a reasonably strong station that plays reasonably decent music in Tennessee. If we listen carefully, listen, you don't hear anything. Now, if we turn the system volume all the way up, system volume is the music level on the intercom system. I'll put this right up to the speaker. Oops. It was playing through. Now we just have static. Oh no, it's there. So you have to listen. I don't know if you'll be able to hear this very well or not. Let me change it back. So this is on the spot testing. All right, so this has changed, or someone, maybe me, wasn't paying close enough attention to what I was going to explain next. So I'm going to alter what I was going to explain. I'm going to explain something totally different, because this is what happens when you do troubleshooting sometimes. So let's go ahead and turn the radio on. I'll put on FM. And now, of course, it's not doing it. Let's turn it off, and we'll turn it back on. Okay, let's give it a minute. I'm going to explain, and then we'll try again. So what I think I observed yesterday was that the 106.5 and the 104.5 would program into the memory as a preset station on the tuner. And when I played those stations, they would play, but they would play at an extremely, extremely, extremely low volume. I would have the system volume over here cranked up to maximum, which would be concert level, blaring through your house kind of sound. And you would have to listen very, very, very carefully, because you could barely hear it coming out of the speakers. Whether there was static over the station or not, I don't remember exactly. This is one of the problems when you work on something one day and then go back to it. Maybe should have written it down, but I didn't. And that's what I was observing today, and that's what I expected to happen in this part of this video. And so the next step, which would be just a few minutes ago in this section of this video, was I turned on FM and I set it to 106.5, and it barely played out of the speaker, kind of like yesterday. But when I switched it to the next preset, which is 104.5, the sound was still very, very, very low, but the station didn't change. It was still playing the same music. And then I switched it up to AM, and it didn't change the station. The display showed an AM station, but the music coming out of the speaker at the really low volume was still the same station as it was on FM, and I'm not even sure that was one of the 2 presets. Now it doesn't seem to be doing that, so we'll put it back on FM. And there is, you won't be able to hear this, but there is, behind the static that you're hearing, there is very faintly a radio station, because I can hear someone speaking. And if I scan, I'm going to push the scan button. And put it on AM. Now, the person on the very faint radio station has stopped speaking and now sounds like some kind of country western. You probably won't be able to hear that. I can barely hear it if I listen really hard. And no matter how I tune this, or whether it's on AM or FM, and see, now it's a little louder. It's all staying on the same music. So this means it's one of two problems, or possibly both. Because remember, there's not always one problem. Sometimes there's more problems. So the tuner on the main board is controlled by the microcontroller on the microcontroller board. So it could be a microcontroller problem, where, remember I talked about how it's not on microcontrollers, it's not an all or nothing proposition. You can have a variety of problems with a set and you fix a lot of the problems then, and the microcontroller is controlling the display and the time and the tuning, how it tunes, and the inputs that light up the LEDs, and it's doing all these things. And all those things seem to work fine, but there's some aspect of it, in this case the radio tuning doesn't work correctly, and that is what you get sometimes. So it could be a microcontroller board problem, could be a tuning problem, could be both problems. I don't know yet, so more troubleshooting is required. This set, all in all, right now is shaping up to be very likely a lightning damaged unit. So I'm going to work on it a little bit more and I'll be back. Hi, I'm back. It's the next day again, and we're back on our IMA3303. It's 9:30 in the morning, almost 24 hours since the last section. Yesterday was a busy day, and I had some time to work on this, but I had other sets I had to work on also. We have made some progress. When we left off in the last section, we had this weird radio station coming in at really low volume, and we would retune the stations and the display would change, but the little bitty bit of sound that was coming out of the speakers, even with the system volume turned all the way up, didn't change. It was always the same. First it was some fella talking, and then it was some country western station. So I did what I said I was going to do. First, to eliminate the possibility of a microcontroller board problem, I substituted in my known good microcontroller board, same exact board, and tried it again. Nothing changed. I was fairly certain that wasn't the cause of the problem. I began to investigate into some type of tuner related issue. One of the things that I happened to find when I was working on it, of course this mostly gets disassembled here, so it's just the main board that I'm working on. If we tip this forward carefully, this shiny box right here is the primary AM/FM tuner. As I was working on it and I was doing some measurements and things while the board was powered up, I noticed that the metal case of this tuner was quite warm. This is not a device that should ever really get warm. You know, maybe if the set is on and it's installed in someone's home and it's enclosed in a wall, sure, the ambient temperature inside the wall is going to warm everything up somewhat and like that, but that's not what this was. This is out in the open, in the air. It should not really be warm to the touch. You know, I just basically leaned my palm on it and thought, that feels like it's kind of warm. So I did some quick measurements and realized that it was drawing way more current than it was probably designed to. There is no specification, and I'm not going to sit down and do the calculations, but just common sense tells you that it should not be warm. In a tuner like this, you do have, this is the actual one that was in the set right here. If you look on this side, it looks pretty boring. There's a bunch of adjustment coils, there's some capacitors, you've got one integrated circuit here, there's some little coils down in there, and you think, oh, it's pretty simple, so not much should go wrong there. But you would be wrong, because if you take the cover off the other side, you got all kinds of goodies on this side. So this would be considered a hybrid board, because you've got surface mount components on one side, you got through-hole parts on the other side. You only have one side that's soldered, which is great, but you've got two other integrated circuits here, one little tiny one down here. Almost everything else on here, all these little surface mounted parts, are all passive parts without looking at each one individually. My guess is, for the most part, they are resistors, capacitors, and perhaps there's a few diodes, not sure. Have to look, probably though. It's a safe bet. If a unit like this is drawing too much current and getting hot from that, that's a pretty good indication that something on here has failed dramatically and it's drawing more current than it was designed to. And in this case, it would be most likely this chip, that chip, or possibly all three. While technically this is a repairable item, today it's not worth the time. If we repair things like this, usually what I do is I wait until I have 5 or 6 of them that need to be repaired, and then I'll set up, because you have to have a setup jig to plug it into, to measure things and replace chips and then test it, and it's a fair amount of work to do. And since we have replacement units, it's just easier to swap it out, at least for today. It won't get thrown away. It'll get put in the tub with broken tuners, and at some point when I have extra time, I'll sit down and fix a whole bunch of them all at once. These are a lot of work to do for such a little thing, but it's important. So I replaced that. That got rid of the heat problem in the tuner, but it didn't change the functionality of the system. It still had all the same problems that it had before. So I spent some time thinking, which is important, and decided that the best course of action was to go through and check things sort of on a component by component basis, just to eliminate the easy things. Now I'm using this one as a sample because it's easier to describe. I don't want to disturb all of this. And this one, I've taken the tuner off of it because it's in the way and it makes it hard to see. But this is the tuning section of this board. And you've got a lot of components, not a ton, but a lot. There's a lot going on here. And the very first things that you have to go through and do is you just start with the easy stuff first. Now, the likelihood that you've got fried resistors or blown up capacitors or things like that is pretty small. If it is a lightning damaged unit, which I believe it probably is, lightning is not going to blow capacitors usually. If you have fried resistors from lightning, they're going to be dark or have a band on them where they're burnt or burnt up altogether. So that's not very likely either. So we're going to discount that for the time being. And we're going to start with more active components. First thing I like to do is I go through and I check all the diodes, because diodes can easily get damaged or shorted or opened from high voltage surge like lightning. So I went through and checked every single diode on the board to verify that they were all good, and they were. The next thing to do is to go through and test all of the transistors on the board. So there are a total of 2, 4, 6, 8 transistors, not a lot. They're divided up into 2 different types. Fortunately, there's not like 8 different transistors. It's just 4 of one kind, 4 of another. The only way you can reasonably check these is you need to remove them from the board, use a proper transistor tester. You can't really do it with diode mode on a multimeter, not very well anyway. You need a proper tester for these. So each pair was removed, each one was checked, and they all turned out to be good, and then they were all put back in. That eliminated all those things. The other 2 things that I decided to do because it was quick and easy, this tuning coil right here, sometimes on 3303s is a problem. It'll go open. Why it goes open, I don't know exactly. Could be from lightning surge, or it could be bad design, which I don't think that's the case. But sometimes these go open, and if these go open, it primarily affects the FM, but you know, it's an easy enough part to swap out. I've got extra ones, so I changed that out. And just on the off chance that it could be an issue, even though it almost never is, right here there's a crystal, and I replaced the crystal with another one. I can test the crystal if I want to, but it just takes like 30 seconds to swap it out. So yeah, it's the easy thing to do. So I did that. No change. Everything was the same. So then what that left us with are the two integrated circuits. There's one here and one here, and these are responsible for a lot of the functionality of the AM/FM tuner and how it communicates with the microcontroller on the microcontroller board. So I decided that it would be best to do this one first and then this one. These share functionality. They have both to do with the AM and the FM, and this would be, I consider to be the primary chip, and this is the secondary chip. Although they work together, you can't have one without the other, and they both have to be good because they do talk to each other, essentially. You'll see on this version of an IMA board, this integrated circuit, if I get some of this junk out of the way, sorry, it's got this big blob of glue on it here, where they glued a resistor, I think, on top of it. This is your standard 16-pin dip package. These were used in IM and IMA3303s up until about 2005 or 6, and then this particular chip was replaced with this little assembly right here. This has a small surface-mounted chip on it and on its own little board, and that board has these header pins on each side, and it fits into the original holes on the main board. So it's a substitute part for the original part. Why that was done, I don't know exactly. It may be that the original integrated circuit was becoming harder to source or more expensive or both, and this was a direct replacement for it, even though you have to make another little board and add a few more parts. You know, if you're going to make tens of thousands of sets, you can't have supply problems where you can't get one key component. So the set we're working on has this style, and this is a small little SIP package right here. And fortunately, I have some of these, some brand new replacement ones. So I removed the one that was in there and then removed the chip, soldered a new chip in its place, and then put this back in the set. When I did that, we had some improvement. So when I replaced this back in the set, all of a sudden our functionality came back. So what does this chip do? If you want to find out what a chip does, what you have to do is you have to find the data sheet for that chip, and it explains to you, it comes from the manufacturer, explains to you what it's for, how it works, what the applications are, and so on and so on. Now, I could find a data sheet for this chip, but unfortunately, all the data sheets for this particular chip are all in Chinese. And I didn't take Chinese in school, so I don't know how to read it, and Google Translate doesn't work on things like data sheets, so it doesn't work out. But what I was able to do, which is a reasonable choice, is I found a data sheet for the original larger chip. You can make a reasonably safe assumption that since this was incorporated as a replacement for the original chip, the functionality is the same. There may be some differences in the peripheral circuit components, but that's not going to really affect how or what this does. To give you an idea how complex this can be sometime, this little tiny chip, a lot of people might look at this and go, oh, well, that's nothing. It's just a little bitty thing like that. You know, it's the size of a little piece of gum or something, you know, or a piece of candy. It's not a big deal. Actually, it is. The data sheet for the original one, like this, okay, this is 22 pages long, and it gives you a very detailed description of what it does and how it functions and how you use it and so on and so on and so on. Basically, this is the original one anyway, was made by Toshiba. This one is made by a different company that I'm not that familiar with. This is a high-speed PLL for digital tuning circuits, surprisingly enough, because it's in a tuner. It goes through all the different functionality of it and everything. By replacing that chip, we brought the tuner back to life. Then it began to work. It wasn't perfect. Then I did a bunch of visual inspections on the back of the board. Back of the board would be this section right here. And what I found also was there were some bad solder joints on the back of the board. I don't think they have anything to do with lightning. I think it was just a poorly soldered board. So I touched up a bunch of the solder joints, and suddenly we had radio. So let's take a look and see. Let's go ahead and we'll turn this on. We're gonna do FM because the AM works fine also, but AM reception is very bad with the LED lights on, so we'll just not suffer through that.
They have equipment large enough to handle orders of any size, allowing them to keep their costs low.
And I pre-programmed a bunch of stations.
It's sort of close. I'm still
To help her choose.
That one doesn't come in very
875
well.
4905 today.
The theater industry faces is marketing.
Like
Marketing
that.
campaigns.
All of the other
It's very
functionality,
expensive to
we'll
market
turn
these
this off.
And the pandemic.
All the other functionality has remained the same. The intercom fully functions, the remote music control fully functions. You can program stations into memory, obviously. The clock keeps proper time. All of those things are correct. And I have the system volume back here set at a nominal level. On a clock, it would be set somewhere between like 10 and 11 o'clock, which is typical for a 3303. So now that we have radio and we have volume, and you can tune stations, and it all basically seems to work correctly. However, we have one more problem. See, there's always something more, it seems like, when it's, especially when it's a lightly damaged unit. We can turn the radio on.
You do not want to
I can manually tune stations.
Flesh is in me, in you.
But we turn it on again. If I scan tune, it just scans endlessly. So scan tune is always interesting, because the way scan tune operates is it's searching for stations with a signal above a certain threshold. It will pass by really, really weak staticky stations and only stop at stations with the signal level above the set threshold. Now, in the early days of digital tuners, a lot of tuners had an adjustment for the scan threshold, and you could change that. It was very similar to analog tuners, where you had basically a squelch adjustment where it would block out weak stations and allow you to manually tune in. You know, analog tuners are the type with a knob and moving mechanical parts, and you could adjust the squelch to block out weak stations that were mostly static. Scan tuners, see, it's still just scanning and scanning. Scan tuners, or digital tuners, in the early days had adjustments. Now it's all incorporated into this. I don't think this chip is a problem, the replacement one I put in, because it is brand new. I wouldn't expect it to be a problem. However, there's another chip on the board, which is this one right here, which is a little hard to see. So I scrounged out a loose one here. Be this little guy right here. And this is also an interesting chip because, again, I found a data sheet for it. It's a Sanyo part. It's a model LA1140, and it's a FM intermediate frequency system for car radio. Now, what you have to know is a lot of intercom systems, especially NuTone systems, probably starting in sort of early 90s, a lot of the radio tuner assemblies are assemblies that would be used in car radios or portable radios, because like this module right here, this tuner module that I showed you, NuTone didn't design this and manufacture this and all of that. What they did was they went to a vendor who made this and looked through what the vendor had available for different models, and they chose one that would be appropriate for their design application, and then you design the rest of the set around this, or the rest of the tuner around this, because you know the engineers, they have lots of other things they have to do. They don't need to design a radio tuner like this when you can buy one from a radio tuner manufacturer off the shelf and you just incorporate it into your design. It's easier that way, and the tuner manufacturer gives you all kinds of support to show you how to incorporate it into your device, because they want you to buy many hundred thousands of these from them, because you know they have to sell them also. A lot of these, you know, this would be common in a car radio. It could be like from a boombox, it could be from an inexpensive home stereo system. You know, we're not talking about high-end Macintosh stuff here. We're talking about something you buy at JCPenney's or Target. So that's what this would be. This chip is important because what it says here, I read through the data sheet. The data sheet for this particular chip is about 18 pages long. It's very detailed. Sanyo, good company, makes a lot of chips. I don't know if they make them anymore, if they've been bought up by somebody else. But One of the things that they talk about here is the LA1140 is an intermediate frequency system IC designed for FM car stereo receivers. Doesn't matter whether it's stereo or not, because there's always a way to make it mono. It features versatile muting characteristics and allow receiver designers to realize the muting performance according to their design concept. Since the muting characteristics can be varied with a switch or semi-fixed resistor, distance and local switching can be accomplished with ease, blah, 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 blah. So this chip apparently is responsible for muting out weak stations. And that may be what's going on in our 3303 now, where the chip on the board is damaged in some way and it's muting out all the stations in scan mode. Do I know that for a fact? No. Can you look inside this and see what's wrong with it? No. Can you measure it somehow to see if that's what's going on? Not really. The easiest thing to do is, since we have replacements, is simply replace it and see what you get. Hopefully it's a problem that can be solved. The other thing that is a possibility, which I don't have any way to really know, is it could possibly be, since these two parts interact with the microcontroller here on the board, there could be some problem in here where this isn't communicating with these correctly, and that's why the scan mode doesn't work correctly. Don't know. If there's a problem here, there's no solution for this. Again, you cannot look inside this to see what's going on. All you can do is measure around it. If it has a flaw inside of it, either the chip itself or the firmware inside of it, you're out of luck. The only way to do that is to replace the entire board. Whether or not a customer would want to bear the extra expense to buy a replacement board just to have the scan feature work, I don't really know. My guess is for most people, probably not. The next step is to replace another chip and then see what we get. So again, I'll be back. I'm back. So here's our IMA3303. It's been completed. I did verify that the scan feature that wasn't working is a microcontroller related problem, not the individual chip on the board. And the way I did that was I substituted my microcontroller board for the customers, and the scan feature worked correctly. Just to make sure, to double check, I did replace the one chip on the board and then tried it again because, you know, belt and suspenders, let's really make sure. I don't think it's a feature that's worth the additional cost of replacing the entire microcontroller board for. I think most people will be good with manually tuning stations and programming it into the preset radio stations. So everything functions as it should. Reception is good. While I had it apart, I did some basic refurbishment on the set. These are strictly age-related issues. IMA3303s, especially the late model ones, 2007, 8, 9, and 10, they have certain inherent problems that can lead to disastrous problems in the future if they're not addressed, and we always address them here. So here's our example board just to make it easy to show you. The refurbishment work that was done was primarily in the amplifier section. This primary capacitor here should always be replaced, regardless of the age of the system. If it's in the shop for something else, it should be replaced. These are very poor quality parts, and they have a tendency to rupture and spew their guts all over the board, which causes an overload in the amplifier. And on our website, you can see pictures of amplifiers with burnt up resistors, damages the differential pair, it can short out the output transistors. It's all very bad. It can happen suddenly, and the damage to the board, while it takes a little bit of time, can happen, you know, over the course of just a few weeks. So always should be addressed when it's here. Change out the voltage regulators, primary filter capacitors, just sort of to spruce it up a little bit so the customer won't have other problems with it in the future. So the number of parts that were replaced, we had a tuner assembly, and we had all of those. Oops, one fell on the floor. There it is. Right there. This was a more extensive repair, but typical for a lightning damaged 3303, whether it's an IM or an IMA. For those of you who contact me all the time and describe a problem with your 3303 or whatever intercom it is that you have and want to know, how do I fix it? This is kind of how you fix it. And as you can see, I've got a lot of time in on this set. Altogether, I probably have close to 3.5, maybe 4 hours, not counting the time I'm making a video about it, just the actual time it takes to do the work. I've been working on 3303 since they came out in 1994, and I have repaired hundreds and hundreds of 3303s, and I have a lot of experience with it, and I understand the sets and understand the design. And even with all of that, sometimes it's a tricky bit of business to do. So if you're not familiar with it, I know people sometimes get ticked off because, they want me to tell them, do this, do that, do this other thing over here, change this part, change this other thing. But really the first step is to know what's wrong with it. Now, and that's not that the radio won't play, it's you have to understand why the radio doesn't play. Otherwise, you don't know where to start, and all you really are is being a parts changer. And a parts changer, you're not going to find all the problems. Sure, sometimes you get lucky and you change out some parts and it works again, but that's just luck. That's not because you really understand what it is you're doing. As it sums up for me, so you think you want to be in the intercom repair business, do you? Well, you better start studying up now because, it's not as easy as people think. I hope you found this interesting, and perhaps for someone it will be helpful. If it is, give it a thumbs up on YouTube because that helps us just a little bit. There'll be a banner right here that shows you how to subscribe. Go to our YouTube homepage, click on the bell, and when you click on the bell, click on it to receive all notifications. And every time we post a new video, you'll get a notification and you can watch it. Also, check out the community tab on our YouTube homepage. That's where I publish mostly pictures and descriptions about what's in the pictures and tell stories about it. If you have something interesting, you can send me some pictures. You can send me an email, and that'll be down here. I'll post it there. I'll give you credit for it. It will generate some discussion sometimes that people see, especially if you have something that's unusual or whatever it is. But that's what the community section is for. That's all for today. See you on the next video.